It's all about incentives, right? Well, first of all, thank you for this opportunity to talk here about routing security, and maybe talking about routing security from a slightly different perspective, both from technical but also from a social thing. And addressing routing security is could be somewhat frustrating, partly because you can only protect your own network so much by deploying those measures. The rest of your protection lies in the hands of other networks. And that's where it brings the social aspect. I think the example of YouTube hijacking has beaten to death, but let me just use it once again. So when YouTube prefix was hijacked, and that caused outage of YouTube for a few hours, there was only so much YouTube could do to prevent that, right? It actually didn't depend on how well YouTube network was itself protected. It actually depended on how well other networks were protecting YouTube, and they weren't. So YouTube could do something to mitigate that attack, and they did by announcing more specific prefixes, by coordinating attack mitigation with other ISPs. YouTube could also have done something to help others to protect YouTube. For instance, and I actually don't know, and probably they did, publishing information on what to expect from YouTube and what to expect as origins of a particular prefix in different databases, be it Internet Routing Registry or be it RPKI, for instance. What I'm going to talk today, and this is the initiative that has started 1 year ago, is something that can help to protect your network. And of course, for this something to help to protect your network, you should also be willing to participate in this effort to help protect others' networks. So that's where this collaborative thing comes into play. But before we move there, just a short recap on the problem space. So what's the problem? I think the main problem is that BGP is designed to work on trust. There is no built-in mechanism in BGP protocol to verify the announcements are correct, so you can easily lie. There's also chain of trust spans continents. It's not just you and me. Well, we can maintain, eye contact. It's just somewhere several hops away that can lie. There's definitely a lack of reliable data. How easy it is for you to build a complete picture of your customer phone. For some it's easy, for some with many levels of interaction, that's really a challenge. And of course, BGP-SEC and other improvements are under development in the IETF and in software industry, but it will take time before they get deployed. Now, if we move away slightly from just control plane and go to data plane, there is another flaw that exists, and that is source IP address spoofing, forging source IP address. And that's a fundamental flaw because global routing doesn't require source IP address, so no checks are usually implemented by default. And social aspect, collaboration. I mean, when things happen, it's very useful to know someone on another side of kind of attacking leg to help you out. How do you reach someone? How do you mitigate a DDoS? Well, having said so, I must say, well, I wouldn't get hyperventilated on that. It's not the sky is really falling. I think we all agree that the system is vulnerable and it's fragile in a way, right? It's not only text we're talking about, it's fat fingers. And most of the things that we see in routing probably can be attributed to fat fingers than the attack. So here while saying security, I think we think more about resilience and stability of the system. But nevertheless, I think we have a problem, and what this initiative is trying to accomplish is not to seal the system and make it bulletproof, but to introduce certain level of hygiene, a minimum level, a base, a new norm, that if we adhere, we would live in much better space in global routing. So, well, as I said, sky is not falling, but impacts, they are visible, they are known, be it routing hijacks or reroutes, different black holes, sort of things, route leaks, or spoofing that caused, volumetric DDoS attacks. And the scary thing here is how easy it is to mount those attacks. So what is available here? Well, there are tools. I mean, we've been dealing with those things, as you know, for decades. It's not a new problem. So tools have been developed. It's routing registries, it's RPKI, it's different approaches to implement anti-spoofing measures, egress filtering, URPF. There is good experience in coordinating DDoS attack mitigation. There are services that allow you to mitigate DDoS attacks. But there are also challenges. I mean, as I start in my presentation, your safety in someone else's hands, right? So while you're investing something in protecting your own network, the actual return on this investment depends on how many other networks implementing these things. And if, like, looking from a network operator perspective, it's like, well, there are many different things that need solution. What's the priority? So this initiative that was started 1 year ago by a group of network operators, first 9 operators signed up to Menace in November 2014, was aimed at 2 things, basically. First, to build a visible community of security-minded network operators that adhere to those norms. It's not that they set this as the kind of desired level of security, not at all. I think many of them are implementing much more than what is documented in Menace, in this mutually agreed norms for routing security. That's interesting play of words. But they define kind of minimum requirement, that what is expected at minimum. So this visible community hope that it will promote this culture of collaborative responsibility. So it's a cultural thing. And another thing, it defines a package. Not doing this or this or this, it's a package of 4 actions, actually optimized for low cost and low risk. And it's technology neutral. Although Menace, if you look, it's a technical document. It's a high level but technical document. But it doesn't prescribe a specific technology or a specific solution. It looks at outcomes, what are desired outcomes. And implementation, that's a second question. So what are good manners? Well, there are 4 of them. Filtering, prevent propagation of incorrect routing information, anti-spoofing, coordination, and global validation. So if you look at this, you would say, well, come on, this is motherhood and apple pie. I mean, those things have been talking about for, ages. How is that different? Well, the thing is, all those actions are scoped. They're limited in scope. That's why they're really minimum. Let me just quickly maybe walk through them, just to give an example, give you some feeling of what those actions are. But you can read more about this at the website, the URL I posted at the beginning, where they explain in more detail. So let's take the first action, the filtering, prevent propagation of incorrect routing information. What this action is asking is to prevent propagation of, ensure correct routing information from your customer cone and your own infrastructure. So there is no talk about peering, so your upstreams. The scope of this action is really limited to your customer cone. When we talk about anti-spoofing, it's well known that there are configurations and environments where traditional anti-spoofing measures can be risky. That can block some of your customer traffic, which you probably don't want to avoid. So here again, the action requires that you do anti-spoofing for your own infrastructure. That's where you really know how traffic flows and topology is well known. And for the customers whose, again, topology is well known to you, i.e. single home stop customers. For more difficult environments, of course, I mean, many implement in more difficult environments, more complex topologies, but that's not the requirement, the minimum requirement of this action. Coordination, while it sounds big, what is required here is that you maintain globally accessible, up-to-date contact information, and you register this in one of well-known databases, be it a peering DB or be it an IRR, somewhere where people can find that. And probably up-to-date is even more important. And the fourth global validation, it's not that you validate globally, it's you help others to validate globally if they will to do this. So network operator has publicly documented routing policy as and prefixes that are intended to be advertised by external parties. So others can use this information and validate. At the same time, you're building, you're bridging this gap where there's lack of resource information filling this database, global database. So that's the 4 actions. But Menace is not only a document. So it's not only some, oh, that sounds good, I would support that. It's actually a commitment. So if you want to become a member of Menace, a participant of Menace, what is required that, besides that you think that's a good thing, you also implement those actions, at least those actions. And also what we are trying to do here is to build sort of a community. So Menace is not something that is kind of fallen on us from the sky. That's the start. It's a live document. So as we move along, the hope that the document, the spectrum of action will expand. And also that this community will keep promoting this, kicking in sort of network effect, because otherwise this initiative cannot scale. As I said, 1 year ago, we launched that with 9 network operators signing up as kind of the founders of this initiative. They created the Menace document itself, which was circulated in various network operators lists for review. Yeah, it was launched last year. If you go to a web page and there is a participants tab, you will see a list of participants. That's kind of a landing page. And you can see that each of the participants, they can select. Some of them are not implementing all the actions. So what is important here is that you are honest about what you implement, of what you are not implementing. So you see 4 actions here as 4 columns, and some of them, they have gaps. But again, this is a living thing, so the expectation that as things improve, as more things are deployed, those gaps will be filled. Well, current activities, we are building, we are building this brand. Right now, it's pretty small. It's about 30 participants on the list, compared to like almost 50,000 ISNs. That's a small number, but we need to start somewhere, right? And to start somewhere, we need to build a reputation for this initiative. And to build this reputation, we need leaders, people that are respected in communities, that take security seriously, and already implemented, of course, those actions to support this initiative, to sign up, to put their name on the website. As I said, building community around Menace is very important, so we have a mailing list, and we hope this mailing list can be sort of, a more trusted place where people can bring up and discuss certain things. Also, including a further development of Menace. Right now, we start working on a sort of a BCOP document, best current operational practice, how to implement Menace. Not how to solve routing security problem or how to solve IP address spoofing problem, but how to implement Menace within this scope, to lower the threshold for maybe small ISPs that haven't implemented Menace yet to do this kind of in a straightforward manner. So, well, that's the thing. That's the main question. Are you interested in participating? Have you implemented those things? If you implement it, if you think this initiative can make a difference, I think, yeah, that's probably a good thing to think about that and go to the website and fill out the form and enter into dialogue, and we'll discuss some of the things and hopefully sign you up. But I think you are thinking that's all good and I actually implement those measures. But why the hell do I need to sign up to this yet another initiative? Why do you think that can make any difference? Well, I cannot guarantee that will make a difference. This initiative may as well die, right, if it doesn't expand, if it doesn't get momentum, if it doesn't reach the critical mass. But if it does, I think it is a good thing. It's a good thing to show industry can address those problems. It's a good thing to visibly show the minimum baseline and new cultural norm in routing security. Because if you're not motivated, if you see no reason to adhere to certain baseline, no technology will help to solve routing security problems. So, well, 3 reasons. Maybe some of them will resonate with you. Maybe you will see other reasons. If you know, I mean, let me know. That would be great. Well, the thing is, where we start, it's a sum of all contributions. So if we're not doing anything, nothing will happen. And we know that if many of us do this stuff, we're much better off. New baseline. I think it's a very clear way to demonstrate the new baseline. When you read the BCP, for instance, with best practices, it all sounds good, and probably it's a solid advice. But one thing you don't know is how many other ISPs are implementing this best current practices. And here in routing security, in global routing security, was very important that how many of others are implementing the same thing that actually determines the return on investment I was talking about at the beginning. And because a community, a reputed effort has its own gravity, and that's where we hope the network effect can kick in. So, well, that's basically the end of my presentation. Here I showed some of the kind of testimonials from existing participants answering questions why they joined Menace. And that's also a question to you. Would you consider, would it be useful? And I'm asking this question to you as individual network operators, but also to you as a Netnod community, because I think it might be, and I would like to have this discussion if you have any thoughts. As a community, would thing like Menace be a useful tool to create new, say, cultural norm in your community on routing security, sort of, if I may use this analogy, create kind of safe neighborhood, right? Well, I understand it's all global, but again, we need to start somewhere. So it's a twofold question here that I would like to ask. But let me just, before I finish completely, let me just make a small poll. I mean, how many operators, network operators, are here in the room? I guess that means you have a S number on your badge, right? It's quite a few, right? How many of you have implemented those actions? At least 2 actions. Don't be shy. So, well, my final question, how many of you would be considering signing up? Cool. Thanks. Well, with this is the end of my presentation, and I would like to hear your thoughts and your feelings, whether you think that's useful, you're willing to support, or you see certain deficiencies or certain questions you would like to get answers before you can proceed further.
Hello. I just wanted to say that, you know, like all other initiatives, the this hopefully will be successful if it reaches a tipping point. And I think, you know, the best idea is to go after big guys and talk to them, because it just, you know, this will motivate the rest of the community to see, you know, as I saw, like Comcast and other guys are implementing this or have been implementing this. You know, it will encourage other either bigger players or smaller players like us to go after this and sign up for this.
Yes, that's a good point. The thing is, I think in my view, big is determined not by the size necessarily of the ISP, but by its reputation in operational community. So that's why I'm applying to you and saying, hey, if you feel yourself as a leader in the space, in the operations, probably that implies that you take security also seriously. Please consider supporting that stuff, because that can help others to make up their minds, and maybe, well, not maybe, but then, as one of the participants told to me, Menace will become useful to me only when ISPs that haven't implemented those measures will implement that. This will motivate them to implement this stuff. We are not at this stage. Well, maybe there are side effects, right? People look at Menace and will say, oh, I'm not doing anti-spoofing, I should do this and implement that. But right now, the main phase is actually building, getting to this tipping point where it has enough gravity to motivate others to do something, right? So here I'm asking not to do those actions. I'm assuming you are doing those actions, but what I'm asking, can you support this initiative as a leader of this industry?
How many people think that the principles in Menace make sense, and it's something that you know, that are consistent with the values you have or the way you do things? Okay. And how many of you think that Menace will actually make a difference, and if it gets enough sort of push? Okay. I have two questions to you. The first part is about, so anything that has this kind of shared responsibility has a challenge, right? When there's several people who do things that are for the greater good, or that where you can't clearly see what's in it just for me. So my first question is, I mean, there are many examples both in the technical world and outside of these challenges. Have you looked at any of those sort of case studies? I mean, you can look at IPv6, you can look at, you could look at climate change, you can look at all sorts of things that have been more or less successful in sort of getting people to sign up or to, you know, sign up to certain principles or to change their behavior. That's my first question. The second one is, because you mentioned that you're working on a BCOP. So how about the tools part of things? Are you thinking about what tools are out there to support these things, or what new tools could be developed, or what initiatives could be supported by ISOC or by others, improving peering DB, but there are lots of other tools that make it easier to do these things, right?
So to your first question, there is a lot of economic studies on that problem. That problem is not unique to the internet, as you said. It's a problem of shared resource, the commons, so to say. So in many cases, unfortunately, that leads to a so-called tragedy of the commons. When no one feels responsible, everyone benefits from the common. No one feels responsible for sustaining the commons, and the commons degrades, right? Well, if we expand this analogy to here, what is degrading, we see increase in volumetric attacks, we see this kind of fat fingers or attacks happening more frequently, and we all suffer from that, right? So this is the commons. Those economic studies, one of the big conclusions is that there is no silver bullet, right? But another thing is very important, that, well, the first study was by economist called Hardin, and what he said, that there are two solutions to the commons. One is regulation. You start regulating this stuff. And one other privatization. They're two things. And then there was another scientist, economist as well, and she got actually a Nobel Prize for that study. She also started the Commons, and she said, well, there's a third solution. It's actually community. It's understanding the value of the Commons in the community and communicating in the community and trying to solve that problem. And she demonstrated this by examples of, water in Africa. There were some interesting examples where she demonstrated how community came together and solved that commons problems. There are some prerequisites. So some of that Menace thing is built on that kind of, economic experience. That's why I think the social component is so important. The visibility of this effort, visibility as I'm participating there, is very important. Communal thing is very important. So it's an excellent question. It's a very challenging problem. We saw that problem with IPv6. We still see this problem with IPv6. We see this problem with DNSSEC. We see this problem with routing. So that's where clear market forces cannot solve this for us. And I think we need to come together and discuss this and clearly demonstrate and raise awareness. And we hope that this effort has those components and help them out. Now to your second question, this effort, well, right now we are not suggesting any tools. One thing that we want to do is write a best current practices document with more clear instructions. Our belief is current tools, while being imperfect, you can achieve those actions without much trouble by using what already exists and available. The thing is, what this best current practices where we're taking it from is by documenting how participants implement those actions, right? So there are not rocket science, the existing tools that we can use. Maybe in the future we can look at other things, right? There are other challenges, and there are also, from Internet Society point of view, we are running other programs looking at those problems. For instance, we had a roundtable on source IP address spoofing, looking at different facets of this problem. We released the report recently. Again, not suggesting a one-step solution, but at least looking where we can attack that stuff. So yeah, I don't know if it answers your question. So the Menace itself doesn't suggest any tools, but we hope that Menace is a platform. It's a tool around which you can build other activities that make sense, right? So if you bring this kind of agenda of routing security to your meetings, to your community, right? Using this as a tool, saying, okay, well, that's a baseline. Let's start from there. You can also build other things, saying, hey, how can we implement this kind of in an effective way? How we as a community, maybe as an internet exchange, can facilitate this stuff. So that's another kind of thinking that it can spawn some other activities we haven't thought of.
Questions or thoughts from the audience? We've got two more goodie bags, so if you ask a good enough question, you'll get one of them.
May I ask one question?
Yeah, go for it. You already have one.
Question. Sometimes you're motivated by the better good of the internet, not a bag of goodies. Suckers. This isn't the first time. I'm not being negative. This is, you know this. This is not the first time we have tried to fix some of these problems, but this is the more sort of concise and well-defined method. Where's the stick? How do we take people that are not compliant and not the existing methods we've done? We publish into the various mailing lists, bad announcements, or we've seen DDoS attack, spoofing BCP38 type stuff, or DNS or NTP amplifiers. Where's the stick? How can we go to an operator in some random place in the world and say, your particular AS has got the following problematic issues, and This is not just a polite, we've done that statement, but this is the stick. What is, how do we get to that level? And I'm saying this from a little bit of frustration, but I'm also saying it from experience of trying to sit with operators and saying, this is important for the whole internet. So this, what you've presented, great, I've heard this before, you know that, and I like it. I want to take it a step further.
So we'd like to think about this in terms of carrots rather than sticks. So where is this carrot? Well, the thing is, I think kind of defining cultural norm has an effect. I think if you go, and I experienced this myself, when you go to like more remote ISPs that do not participate in discussions like we have, many things like this they're taking quite seriously as a, I wouldn't say as a law, right, but that's something that needs to be implemented, right? In many cases those things are just ignored, of course, right? But there is a chance that they will be taken seriously, right? So the gravity of this effort, as I said, a potential gravity of this effort is a potential carrot. Another carrot, but that depends on a particular environment, is that if industry doesn't come together and demonstrate it can solve that problem, well, now the solution to the commons problem is regulation. That's what I mentioned. I spoke to many of North American colleagues, and they're really afraid that if more headlines appear, pointing to those kind of gaps in the routing system, regulators will step in and suggest something not very sophisticated, not very thought through, right, and not very maybe aligned with kind of operational practices. So that is one of the things that can demonstrate this, right? And if it grows, it can give some peace of mind to regulators as well. That's another thing. Another thing is, if we grow this big enough, it can be a quality mark, right? So it can be another carrot, right? Why people do ISO 9000 certification, right? So, well, this is kind of stepping into more regulatory space, but if we create this as a quality mark, and if we promote this good enough, I think that creates enough motivation for people to join. Another part of the carrot is making that as simple as possible. That's why I said, best current practices, clear instructions. I mean, let's not talk about complex topologies and complex networks. Let's talk about this 80% of star biases. They have 1 or 2 or 3 customers, right? They have to implement this stuff. Very clear instructions. When we compiled this document, one thing that was pretty shocking is that how difficult it was to find good references. If you look at the document, scroll down, there was some discussion. And discussion is what are possible ways to implement those actions. So it was pretty shocking, our difficulty to find good references, to point people to clear operation instructions, how to implement this stuff. It takes spoofing. The thing that we kind of going and banging ISPs on the head, implement BCP 38. How many people read BCP 38? The only thing BCP 38 says, implement ingress filtering. Nothing more. I mean, yeah, that's a good advice, but go figure out how to do that. Right? BCP 84 does a better job at that, but nevertheless. So there is certain lack of clear instructions and practices here. We hope if we, attach to that concise and nice document proven by practice, that will lower the threshold, and that's another part of the carrot. So maybe it's not a full carrot, but some pieces that might grow. Another thing that I would like to ask is, yes, it's complex. It has this probability of success. It has a probability of failure, right? And we can discuss what is the balance. But is there an alternative? Unless we are saying, no, we are not going to solve routing security problem. That's one of the possible answers. But if we say, yes, we would like to solve routing security problem, what is the alternative? That's one of the suggestions. Do you have a better suggestion?
Just a little comment. As all we know, IPv4 addresses are running out or ran out, basically. And people now apparently start, announcing the addresses they don't own, they don't own, for a short period of time, and send like massive spams, and just for a couple of hours even. So that's obviously is gonna if people implement this, is gonna address this. But not everybody care about quality marks. There are some people who actually make money out of out of not implementing this. So I think what industry did in fighting like spam and other stuff, putting carrots and sticks beside each other. Don't you think that might be a more effective system to bring people on board?
I didn't quite catch what kind of sticks and carrots you're suggesting.
Like list of the ASs who are running these things like in a regular basis. Our friend just mentioned. Right now, I mean, you have blacklists for IPs and operators who actually don't behave. For instance, for spam and other stuff. And ASs obviously are very smaller number and can be arranged something for that for the operators. Don't you think?
I think that look. I think there might be more effective ways of dealing with the problems, right? As it comes to toolkit, this initiative is not specifically about toolkit, right? I think those toolkits can be discussed and can be integrated in the Menace document if you find a better tool. But tool is not the solution, right? Because the solution, it needs this kind of wider deployment. So that's the challenge we are facing. Not that there are no tools, but that those tools are not used. So this initiative is trying to overcome that challenge. So it tries to create sort of a reference, if you will, because without a reference saying, well, at least that has to be implemented about quality reference, it's very hard to tackle a problem. It's very hard to globally say, well, this is bad and this is good, right? Because we're just discussing that, right? If you have a clear reference, then you can say everything is below is bad. Well, if you want a black and white picture, everything below is bad, everything above is good. So I think that's the value of that effort. But I agree with you, there might be other more creative things that being developed and we can integrate here as well. But this initiative, we want to project this as a positive thing, right? What I in my answer to Martin, I said, it's a carrot, it's not a stick. We want to see this as a wall of fame rather than a name and shame technique. May I ask one question? Not for another bad, but again for the good of the internet. So when you ask a question, how many people implement that stuff and how many people agree with those actions and principles, it was quite a number of hands, and much less so when I ask who is going to sign up. So can folks just say why they think it's difficult for them to sign up? Can you share this? Why you think it's well, lack of interest, corporate culture? I don't know. I mean, I really appreciate if you can share those. This feedback with me.
I personally can answer about me. So I raised my hand when it was about do we apply some of this, and it's yes, definitely. But I didn't answer about do we want to participate in the initiative, because I don't make decisions. So I can tell about for my colleagues about some certain actions, but about in general, I think I should just report to them that there is ongoing initiative, and maybe why not.
So to reply to you, well, that's not the first time I'm making this presentation, so I have some experience in kind of thinking about that. And I understand that for some of you it would be difficult, to rather than report, to promote this in your company. I mean, if you think like a call with some of your colleagues and with you can help, right? Don't hesitate. Write me an email. We can set up a call. We can discuss these things. Not necessarily, that will lead to sign up. At least we can understand better what the playing field, where you stand with regards to those things, right? Because it's a lot of this is a cultural thing as well, right? And in some companies, it's just, a different cultural stance on those things. And in some companies, it takes time to understand what is the benefit, long-term benefit in participating in something like this. In some companies, you need to understand how credible is this effort before we can put our name on it. So those kind of questions. If you're thinking of this and if you come with some feedback, please, I really appreciate if you can write to me. Well, I don't know where there is a general info address if you go to the website. Please write to us. We appreciate that. Even if you're not signing up, if you're just saying, well, Andrei, this is complete crap. Our company will never do this for this and this and this reasons. That can help us maybe to develop the messaging better and promote this effort better next time.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you, and thank you very much, and thanks for the discussion.
Thank you.